DEC. I'd like to thank everyone for their interest in this permit application denial for Little Lake St. Catherine. And in a minute, we'll get started, and I'll walk through the agenda and then hand it over to my colleague, Misha Setner. We'll go from there. So I'm just going to give the participants one more minute to join us, and we'll get started shortly. Good. So we're going to get started. Just to let folks know that this meeting is being recorded. This is a virtual public meeting to discuss the lake encroachment application number 2971 for a Little Lake whole lake aeration system. The Department of Environmental Conservation has issued a draft denial for this permit, and we'll be taking public comment in this meeting here today. So why don't we start with some introductions, and we can quickly just ask folks to introduce themselves, and if you're representing an organization, feel free to mention that. And just go very quickly, name an organization of about 15 to 20 folks on the line. Let's start with folks from the Department of Environmental Conservation first, then we can move to folks representing different organizations concerned with Little Lake St. Catherine. So again, my name is Oliver Pearson. I'm the Lakes and Ponds Program Manager in the Watershed Management Division of the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. Starting with DEC folks, let me ask Misha, Laura, and Zapata to introduce themselves.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Misha Setner. I am the lead permit analyst for this project. I oversee the Lakes and Ponds regulatory program, and I'll be the primary lead for discussing how we came to this decision this evening.
Hi, my name is Laura DeLugalecki. I work with the Lakes and Ponds program in the regulatory group with Misha. Tonight, I'm going to be monitoring the chat box. If you have questions in the chat box, I'll make sure that they are brought to the attention of the group. Or if anybody has any questions, they can send me a message in the chat. I'll probably also be muting a lot of microphones just to keep background feedback noise. So if you have something to say, you may have to unmute yourself first. Thanks.
Zapata?
Hi, I'm Zapata Courage. I am the district wetland ecologist for the town of Wells, and I do review regarding activities that may have impacts on wetlands, which Little Lake does have. Thank you.
Great. We have about 15 other people in the meeting, so I'll just read folks' first names and ask you to introduce yourself briefly, and then I'll switch to the folks on the phone. We have about 3 or 4 of those as well. So in no particular order, just going from the top on my list, Herman. And I think most people are muted. So if you
can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
This is Hernan LaFontaine. I'm a homeowner in the Little Lake on Clayton Track in Wells, Vermont.
Great, thank you, Mr. LaFontaine. Bob Short.
Yeah, I'm Bob Short, Director with Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund.
David.
David Emmons, President of the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund.
Great, thanks, David. Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy Jones, just participating as a property owner on Lake St. Catherine.
Great. Carla Dendor.
Hi, yes, This is Carla. I'm a resident on Little Lake on Clayton Track.
Great. Owen Thomas. And Owen, if you are trying to speak, you will need to unmute yourself on your machine. Okay, we'll come back to Owen. Next on my list is Robin Chestnut Tangerman.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep, this is Robin Chestnut Tangerman from Middletown Springs, former representative for the district, including Wells. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Robin. Rich Young.
Yeah, this is Rich Young. I live on Channel, and I'm a director in LSCCF.
Great. Robin Barley. Great. Well, Robin, if you're trying to speak, you'll have to unmute yourself. I'll give you another shot. And we'll come back to you at the end. Next is Representative Sally Akey. I hope I pronounced that properly.
It's pronounced Aki, rhymes with hockey. Yeah, my name is Sally Aki. I'm a resident of Middletown Springs, and I am the newly elected representative for the Rutland-Bennington district, which does include the town of Wells.
Thank you. Senator Collmore.
Yes, good afternoon. Senator Brian Collmore just returned from the State House. Got sworn in as my fourth term in the Vermont State Senate. I sit on Senate Agriculture and Senate Government Operations Committees.
Thank you. Sue Ritchie.
Hi, I'm a homeowner in the channel, and I'm also a director of the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund.
Great. Thanks. Tina Peterson.
Yes, I'm a homeowner on Little Lake, and I am also the treasurer of the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund.
Great. Thank you. I'll go back to the two people we missed. The first was Owen Thomas. And then I believe the second was Robin Barley. Okay. Great. We have three folks on the phone. If you're on the phone and you want to speak, you have to unmute yourself by pushing *6. We have an 802-417-1058 number.
Hi, this is Robin Barley. Sorry, I had the star, but I didn't get the 6. So thank you for saying that. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Thanks, Robin.
Okay, thank you.
This is
Robin Barley.
This is Don Bruce, Chair of the Wells Select Board.
Great. Thank you, Robin, and thank you, Bruce. And I believe we have a 518-428-1943 number as well. All right. We'll if that person wants to speak later, they can push *6 to unmute themselves.
Oliver, just so you know, the gentleman you referred to as Bruce, that's actually Don, and his last name is Pruce with a P, and he is the chairman of the Wells Select Board.
Great. Excellent. Thanks for the clarification, David. So great. I think we've completed the introductions. And so once again, let me welcome everyone to this meeting. Again, we're here to discuss the whole lake aeration system in Little Lake proposal to the Vermont DEC Lakes and Ponds programs for a lake encroachment permit. This project, again, is within our Lake and Ponds programs jurisdiction for a lake encroachment project. And essentially, upon review of the application materials, the Department of Environmental Conservation has determined that the project does not meet the requirements to receive a permit, and therefore this meeting is to discuss this draft denial decision and essentially take public comment on this decision, which has been made public through the Environmental Notice Bulletin. So I'm going to go over the agenda next. We have from now until 5:30 to take public comment and discuss this issue. Misha Setner from DC will speak next to review some of the meeting rules and purpose of the meeting. We'll invite a representative from the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund to present on the proposed project. Next, the Department of Environmental Conservation will review our process for lake encroachment applications and the draft denial decision. We'll take public comments, and at that point, we have a list that's been assembled based on input from many members of this group, I will read off the names of each person who has previously registered to comment in order with which that request was received. Each person will have 3 minutes to make a public comment, and we'll try to keep to that schedule. If you haven't already registered to make a comment but would like to, please indicate in the chat if you're able to, and we'll add you to the list at the end, and we'll do a verbal call to see if we've missed anyone at the very end, and we'll take comments up until about 5:25 p.m. Then we'll wrap up and talk about next steps in the permit application review process. So that's the agenda. I'll remind folks in the role of facilitator of how much time we've given for each section. And so I'm going to hand it over to Misha Setner to review the meeting rules and purpose of the meeting. He has about 5 minutes to do so. Over to you, Misha.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. And thanks everybody for coming. And Oliver already put us through a pretty good exercise on how to unmute ourselves, whether you're on your computer or calling in. Again, if you're calling in, it's *6 to unmute yourself. But in general, we found that holding these public meetings in the virtual format, generally it's best that everyone remain muted unless asked to unmute during the public comment section of the meeting. So overall, the purpose as to why we're here, this is a public informational meeting on the application and draft denial of that application. The meeting is to provide the public information on the project, that draft denial, how that decision was made, and to allow for the public to ask questions and submit oral and written comments. For comments and questions we receive during the meeting, we'll answer to the best of our ability. In addition, responses to all comments and questions will be addressed formally in a response summary document that will be issued with the final decision. And then, so yeah, moving forward with the meeting as a whole, we ask you to remain muted. Once folks that are lined up to give a comment, once you're done with that comment, you'll be muted again, just so that the next doesn't interrupt the next individual's comment. And Oliver already noted, if you didn't sign up previously but would like to make a comment, the chat box is there, and Laura is monitoring that, and she'll make sure that your name gets called out. And then, so yeah, these public comments, we're taking comments now. The public comment period itself extends until the end of next week on the 13th, Wednesday the 13th. So at this point, that's the general overview of the purpose of the meeting and how the next little less than an hour and a half will go. And so I'll hand it over to the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund, the applicant, to present on their project.
Thank you, Misha. I'm going to try and make this stay within those 10 minutes, so I'm going to jump right into it. My comments today are to help put this meeting in context. On April 25th of 2011, the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund applied for an aeration permit for a small portion of the east side of Little Lake. This application was for 18 diffusers. On March 29th of 2012, a permit for 9 diffusers was granted. And as with all DEC permits, certain criteria need to be met and findings need to be arrived at in order for these permits to be granted. I'd like to read a few of the excerpts from the permit language of this first approved aeration permit. And I quote, "The applicant has proposed a system of 18 diffusers based upon the contractor's recommendation, but has agreed to install only 9 diffusers. This number of diffusers is a compromise between the department and the applicant. The applicant may apply for approval to install additional diffusers depending upon monitoring results from operating an air system of 9 diffusers for 2 summers. Purpose of the project. The purpose of the project is to reduce or consolidate sediment via improved decomposition to increase water depth. Effects on water quality. The applicant will be required to monitor for turbidity and nutrients and make adjustments if noticeable increases are detected. No water quality problems will result from the proposed project if it is conducted in accordance with this permit. Effects on aquatic shoreline vegetation and shoreline vegetation. The department did not find any credible scientific evidence that the project would impact aquatic vegetation. It is not anticipated that the project will result in a measurable impact on aquatic and shoreline vegetation. Effects on navigation and other recreational public uses, including fishing and swimming. The proposed purpose of the project is to have a positive impact on navigation, recreation, and other public uses by increasing water depth. Consistency with natural surroundings. The aeration system will be below the water with a compressor located on shore. The project will not have a significant impact on natural surroundings. Public trust analysis. The project will provide useful information to the applicant and the department regarding the efficiency of this management technique to increase the decomposition of sediment and increase water depth in selected areas. The project as proposed and monitored will not have a negative impact on the public resource. The public benefits associated with the project outweigh the potential negative impacts on the public trust uses, and the department therefore determined that the project is consistent with the public trust doctrine, and the permit is therefore granted. For 2 years, weekly data was collected: water depth, total phosphorus, dissolved phosphorus, total nitrogen, total suspended solids, pH, and aquatic plant density. At the end of 2 seasons of operation, this data was evaluated by both the applicant and the department for evidence of effectiveness in increasing the lake depth and significant changes in these parameters. A second permit was applied for. On March 14th of 2013, the LSCCF applied for an extension of this aeration system because of the tremendous success of the first 2 seasons of the initial system. Shortly after filing, this permit was granted. Again, criteria needs to be met in order for these permits to be granted, and I want to read a few excerpts from the permit language of the second approved aeration permit. And I quote, public good analysis. The public benefit of obtaining information regarding the effectiveness of the proposed management technique, aeration in Vermont waters, overwhelmingly outweighs the minimal impact of diffusers and airlines. To date, there have been no documented adverse impacts due to the installation of the first 9 air diffusers. The additional 4 air diffusers and airlines are not expected to adversely affect the use of the public resource for boating, fishing, or swimming. Effects on water quality. To date, there have been no noted instances of existing air diffusers generating turbidity. Therefore, it is not expected that the additional 4 air diffusers will result in increased turbidity in Little Lake. In addition, preliminary data has not shown adverse impacts to water quality. No water quality problems will result from the proposed project if conducted in accordance with this permit. Effects on fish and wildlife. To date, there have been no instances of existing air diffusers adversely affecting fish and wildlife habitat. Effects on aquatic and shoreline vegetation. The department did not find any credible scientific evidence that the project would impact aquatic or shoreline vegetation. To date, there is no direct data monitoring of information to indicate that the existing aeration system has had any effect on aquatic vegetation. Therefore, previous permit conditions requiring the permittee to monitor aquatic vegetation have been suspended in this amended permit. The public good analysis summary. The project is not anticipated to negatively impact water quality, fish, wildlife habitat, aquatic and shoreline vegetation, navigation and recreation and public uses, the natural surroundings, or have a negative cumulative impact. The public benefit of obtaining information regarding the efficiency of the proposed management technique in Vermont waters overwhelmingly outweighs the minimal impact of diffusers and airlines. Overall, the project will not adversely affect the public good. Additionally, in that permit language, operational water quality monitoring was reduced to bi-weekly, and again, this was based on positive results from 2 seasons of operation of the initial system. Permit number 3. On January 26th of 2015, the LSCCF applied for another expansion of the aeration project on Little Lake. This time the expansion was for 14 diffusers on the west side of Little Lake. This permit was granted later that year in October. I would like to read a few excerpts from that permit language of this third approved aeration permit. And I quote, effect of the encroachment. No less intrusive feasible alternative was identified to achieve the stated purpose of the project. The removal of organic sediments via improved accelerated decomposition that result in greater water depth is less intrusive than the potential mechanical means of organic sediment removal. Mechanical means of removal, such as dredging, would have negative impacts to water quality, fish, wildlife habitat, and aquatic vegetation. Effects on water quality. Based on data obtained as a result of the water quality monitoring plan established under the previous lake encroachment permit, the diffusers pose no negative impact to water quality. The additional 14 diffusers are not expected to pose negative impact to water quality, given that the two systems are operating within a similar open water environment of Little Lake. The expanded project authorized by this permit is of similar scale to that of the project authorized under the previous lake encroachment permit, and therefore additional water quality monitoring plan at this location was determined to be unnecessary. Public trust analysis. The public trust uses relevant to this proposal are fishing, boating, swimming, navigation, and environmental research related to the use of aeration as a potential site-specific lake management strategy to reduce accumulated sediment as a way to reestablish previously accustomed public uses. The project will provide useful information to the permittee and the department regarding the effectiveness of this management technique to increase the decomposition of organic sediment, to increase water depth in select areas where use has been impeded by accelerated organic sediment accumulation. If the project is successful in achieving this purpose, there will be a positive impact to the public trust uses that are relevant. The department therefore determined that the project is consistent with the public trust doctrine and the permit was granted. End quote. I am pleased to report that during the 6 seasons of operation with the East Side Aeration System, the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund has documented an average of 4 feet of increased depth. This limited project has been overwhelmingly successful. With our desire to expand the success of these aeration projects to the rest of Little Lake, earlier this year, the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund submitted an application for full lake aeration, requesting an increase of only 13 diffusers to the existing systems. We fully expect the DEC to grant this permit after the public comments have been heard today and throughout the rest of the public comment period. And now with that, I look forward to the public comments. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, David, and thanks for respecting your allotted time limit. We'll move on. Next on the agenda is Misha Setner from the Vermont DEC, providing a review of the Department of Environmental Conservation's application review process for lake encroachment applications and a summary of the draft denial decision. And Misha has also 10 minutes for these remarks. Over to you, Misha.
Yeah, so lake encroachment applications are reviewed under this procedure called the interim procedures for the issuance or denial of encroachment permits. And within that, the primary review structure for lake encroachment applications is the public good determination, as well as a public trust analysis. And in order to do this public good determination, this interim procedure identified this 3-part test as guidance in determining whether there's an adverse effect on the public good. And so when we receive an application, we take each the technical components of that application and run it through this test. And so for the first component, we ask these 3 questions. Is the extent of the proposed encroachment excessive for its stated purpose? Is there a feasible alternative to the proposed encroachment which is less intrusive? And have all practical measures been taken to reduce the impacts on the public resource? The second part of the test is the department will examine the effect of the proposed encroachment on water quality, fish and wildlife habitat, aquatic and shoreline vegetation, navigation, and other recreational and public uses, including fishing and swimming. In addition, the department will examine the proposed encroachment's consistency with the natural surroundings, any applicable municipal shoreline zoning ordinances, and any applicable state plans. And third, the department will determine if the potential cumulative effect of the encroachment, when considered in conjunction with other existing encroachments, is adverse. If after applying this three-part test, the department determines that the proposed encroachment does not adversely affect the public good, a permit will be issued. If the proposed encroachment fails to meet any portion of this test, the permit application will be denied. So just quickly backing up as to Little Lake as a whole, what I'm sharing now is the lake scorecard of Little Lake. And as you can see, the water quality trend score of Little Lake is good. Overall, the water quality in Little Lake meets our standards. The watershed of Little Lake is moderately disturbed. And when you look at the graphs on the left, you can see measurements that have been taken, go all the way back to 1979 for spring total phosphorus, and then summer total phosphorus and chlorophyll A, all generally show stable trends. Little Lake has no water quality impairments, which is great. So you know, reviewing the lake scorecard, Little Lake's doing pretty good in terms of water quality and lacking in any water quality impairments. However, folks on Little Lake, they all know very well that Eurasian water milfoil is a considerable nuisance when trying to boat or swim through Little Lake itself. And so there's been we have a really long-term data set of aquatic plant surveys for the whole Lake St. Catherine chain. And as you can see in these graphs, just the frequency of occurrence and percent cover of milfoil in Little Lake is fairly high. It's the most dominant plant in the water body, and is for the main waters themselves, the areas where navigation primarily occurs. This species is the primary nuisance, or the primary impediment to public good uses such as boating and swimming. So overall, project description and purpose. As David identified, they had applied for a whole lake aeration system. That system was to comprise of 46 air diffuser units at the bottom of Little Lake. Overall, it's meant to increase the concentration of dissolved oxygen. Overall, this is to create an aquatic environment more suitable for aerobic decomposition of organic sediment. And attempting to increase the rate of decomposing organic sediment was intended to make Little Lake deeper, which could then limit the available habitat for aquatic plants, such as Eurasian water milfoil, as a means to improve recreational use of Little Lake. So that first part of that public good determination test, whether excessive for the stated purpose, aeration as a lake management tool is primarily used for managing severe cultural eutrophication and cyanobacteria blooms, neither of which are currently recorded issues in Little Lake. Using aeration as proposed is not an appropriate tool to achieve the project purpose, making the project excessive. The waters of Little Lake are not impaired for dissolved oxygen. Attempting to increase the concentration of dissolved oxygen with supplemental oxygenation when the waters are naturally oxygenated, and increased oxygenation does not support the management objective of Little Lake is excessive. Overall, in general for Little Lake, there's no data to support that lake-wide sedimentation is occurring at unnaturally high rates, except for an area, an isolated area along the northwestern shoreline of the lake, where specific sources of upland runoff have been identified. Public good uses such as boating or swimming are not often being directly impacted by sediment and shallow depth, except for that limited nearshore location. That location was approved to be dredged in 2014 under a lake encroachment permit. While shallow depth and lake-wide sedimentation often do not directly impede public good uses, dense aquatic plant growth, again, primarily Eurasian water milfoil, is throughout the water column and can be the primary cause of impeding public good uses. Attempting to deepen all of Little Lake is excessive for the primary, as the primary lake-wide management issue is aquatic plant growth, not sedimentation or shallow depth. In general, the depth of Little Lake has remained relatively constant and has sufficient depth to allow for public good uses to occur unimpeded. Overall, the department determined that the proposed project is excessive for the stated purpose. Less intrusive feasible alternatives. I've already noted that the primary issues that have been identified, management issues in the lake, are that localized area of sedimentation along the northwest corner of the lake, as well as the dense population of Eurasian water milfoil that's can be attributed to impeding those public good uses. So less intrusive feasible alternatives, as noted earlier, the department has issued two permits to the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund to dredge that area of known localized sedimentation. In addition, there are numerous aquatic nuisance control permits, ones for mechanical harvesting issued to the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund. There's also a permit issued to the Lake St. Catherine Association for herbicide, as well as diver-assisted suction harvesting. Those projects can directly target the issue that is the nuisance growth of Eurasian water milfoil control. So altogether, existing permits and well-established management approaches have not been fully utilized in the Little Lake. The applicant has not demonstrated that those approaches are inadequate. The department has therefore determined that there are less intrusive feasible alternatives to address the issues of localized sedimentation and Eurasian water milfoil growth. Effects on water quality. I'm not going to go through all of these, but as David did his presentation, he reviewed the findings that were previously made on the previous aeration permits that we had issued. Something that's changed since the time that those conclusions were written is that the department took on a substantial effort to do a scientific review of the scientific literature that's available, and produced a report on aeration as a lake management tool, and we produced that report in early, I want to say January 2019. And as a part of that report, we reviewed the scientific literature and did the assessments as to, how can aeration potentially impact water quality. And so you can see here with this list that there are potential impacts to water quality from aeration. So over the period that the previously permitted aeration system was operating, adverse impacts to water quality were not observed, and water quality parameters remain stable. This outcome suggests that the aeration system neither adversely impacted water quality nor provided a benefit to water quality. Currently, Little Lake has no water quality impairments. It meets the Vermont water quality standards and is in a clear water steady state dominated by aquatic plants, as opposed to a turbid water steady state dominated by algae or cyanobacteria. Therefore, pursuing a project that attempts to alter the natural chemical integrity of the water body with no clear benefit to water quality unnecessarily jeopardizes the current steady state. Again, as a part of the scientific review of aeration as a lake management tool, it was identified how there are potential negative impacts to things like fish and wildlife habitat. The primary one being how aeration can change a still water environment to one that is rapidly moving. That disturbance has impacts on the species that live within the water, and so that potential alteration and impact from a still water to a rapidly moving water environment can have cascading effects on the overall food web. So the proposed alteration to the natural, biological, chemical, and physical integrity would unnecessarily impact the current natural steady state of the fish and wildlife habitat of Little Lake. Additionally, given the lake-wide nature of the project, these impacts may be amplified within the areas of wetlands within Little Lake, as wetlands are typically areas with no dissolved oxygen. Consistency with municipal shoreline zoning ordinances and applicable state plans. As a whole, in-lake treatments as the primary tool to address water quality issues is not consistent with Vermont's surface water management strategy, nor is it consistent with the watershed management strategies promoted by the department and supported through the tactical basin planning process. Therefore, implementing a whole lake management project on a water body that has no water quality impairments and meets the Vermont water quality standards is inconsistent with the applicable state surface water management strategy. Cumulative impact and public good analysis summary. The proposed project is excessive for the stated purpose, has less intrusive feasible alternatives, may result in impacts to water quality, fish and wildlife habitat, and aquatic vegetation, and is inconsistent with the natural surroundings. Based on the current scientific understanding of how aeration is used as a lake management tool, as well as the DEC's 2019 report on aeration, it was concluded that the operation of the aeration system in Little Lake between 2012 and 2018 did not significantly reduce sedimentation, alter the depth of Little Lake, or reduce aquatic vegetation density. There are no clear benefits to the public to be achieved by the proposed project. Additionally, there are potential negative impacts to natural biological, chemical, and physical integrity. The cumulative potential impacts from the proposed project would adversely affect the public good. Therefore, the public must deny the application. And finally, the public trust analysis is that based on the current scientific literature on aeration as a lake management tool, as well as the documented use of the aeration system in Little Lake, it is not anticipated that the proposed project would have achieved its goals and benefited public trust uses, as the use of aeration in Little Lake is inconsistent with how aeration as a lake management tool is used. Little Lake currently has no water quality impairments. It meets the Vermont water quality standards. Therefore, the potential unintended consequences of operating a whole lake aeration system on the biological, chemical, and physical integrity unnecessarily jeopardizes the overall natural ecological integrity of Little Lake. Potential adverse impacts of the project outweigh any potential public benefit. Therefore, the department has determined that the proposed project is not consistent with the public trust doctrine and must deny the application.
Great. Misha, are you completed?
Yep, and that's overall, that was the rundown, the summary of the file and the process through which how we got there.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Misha. So we will now transition into taking public comments and questions. We have a list, which I'll get into in a minute. I'll give everyone 3 minutes for each comment. I'll let folks know when that 3 minutes are up. And if you're still speaking, please at that point, make an effort to finish your remarks. You know, again, under statute, the point of this section of the meeting is for the public to provide comments on the draft decision. And if there are questions, either the applicant or DEC staff representing the secretary will answer those questions to the best of our respective abilities. And so with that, I'm going to name the first and the second person on the list, invite them to comment, and just let the second person know that they're coming next so they're prepared to make their remarks. So we will begin with Representative Sally Hockey, rhymes with hockey, I believe, and then Mr. Bob Short is second on the list. So Representative Hockey, over to you.
Thank you very much. My concerns about the Little Lake sort of go into 3 different areas. The first one, I will be speaking as a private citizen. I live in Middletown Springs. I am an avid kayaker, and over the past 15 years, have spent countless hours kayaking on all of Lake St. Catherine. In the denial report in section 15, it says that aeration, quote, will compromise the ability of the lake users to enjoy the aesthetic conditions. I paddled through the areas that when the aerators were working before, and I was not disturbed by them at all. The report says it can be considered, quote, that the dense milfoil is also compromising the aesthetic conditions. So to me, that is the definite yes. The aerators were not compromising, but the milfoil was. I'm also the newly elected representative for the district that includes Wells, and therefore I've had conversations with the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund, and they've given me some of their documentations or shared with me. And I'd like to point out one area of concern that I saw in item number 9 of the draft denial. You reference possible negative effects on the wetlands in the north end of Little Lake. Yet there was included in that no documented, you cite no evidence, and there are no documented cases of that happening with an aeration project. Dr. Jennifer Jones, I was informed, testified at a DEC-sponsored meeting in 2020. She has aeration projects in over 150 lakes in Michigan with no documented negative impact to any wetlands or sensitive information. The Lake St. Catherine group has also provided supporting documentation from Dr. Alex Horn and Professor Wayne Carmichael. So it does seem that they are all on record and there is no negative impact from a whole lake aeration system on wetlands. So I think perhaps that concern presented an item to rest. I am also aware of the concern that the deterioration of the condition of the Little Lake could result in less use, fewer visitors, which would have a negative impact on the local businesses in the town of Wells and the surrounding area. There could also then be a decrease in the shoreline property values, a decrease in the town's grand list. And this could end up having an impact on even more than just the town of Wells, but could also impact Middletown Springs, which is in a unified school district with Wells. So we must consider the integrity of the Little Lake, but I think we must also be aware of the negative impact on small businesses that are already struggling. And I would like to see a combined project where both public and private sectors working together could agree on a goal, agree on the mile markers, all directed for the good of the Little Lake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Aki. The next, I didn't hear any questions in those remarks. I'll just ask if anyone from DC or the applicant wants to respond to any points the representative made. Excellent. We'll now move. Next on the list, as I said, is Mr. Bob Short, and after Mr. Short, Carla Dendor is the next commenter. So Mr. Short, over to you.
Yeah, this may be redundant, but it's necessary. I'm going to talk about the permitting process, the history, data collection, and DO numbers. Here we go. In 2012, the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund was issued a permit for an aeration project in Little Lake St. Catherine. The DEC and the Lakes and Ponds Division set a stringent and expensive monitoring protocol to be followed. Testing methods and equipment were approved. All monitoring procedures and data were reviewed and accepted by your predecessors. There was no negative impact on the environment, nor were there any complaints filed. Positive results were documented. The data collected was a basis for expansion permit that David talked about, and it was issued in 2013. The monitoring protocol was the same, and the results were consistent with the original permitted project. Another permit was applied for in 2015 and approved from the data that was for two permits supported. And in 2018, we were approaching a project deadline and renewal permits needed to be applied for. Lake St. Catherine President received a letter from Julia Moore, the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources. She requested that we submit one permit application to cover the 3 permits previously. She also pointed out the criteria that was used to support this application. We started working on the application and the supporting documents. And then we were instructed by the DEC and Lakes and Ponds that we now need a model study. Today we need nothing because your new DEC and Lakes and Ponds staff has decided that the approved data from our 3 aeration permitted projects is now irrelevant. 7 years of in-lake real-time data is irrelevant. All the volunteer time, the $200,000 plus invested, irrelevant. All the water quality samples, lab reports, depth measurements that were taken with an EPA approved measuring device, the 400 plus timestamp DO measurements were taken with a professional YSI meter. They were just discredited. If anything should be discredited, it should be the Lakes and Ponds Department depth and DO measurements. What are your timestamp DO numbers? We haven't seen those yet. We are questioning the accuracy of your data and the inconsistencies of the permitting process in general. Speaking of DO, dissolved oxygen, because of global warming, Mother Nature needs help. DO levels are lower in warmer water, especially in shallow waters like the Little Lake, which, by the way, the Little Lake is a nursery for the 3-lake system. Wouldn't it be wise for the DEC to take a proactive approach to the warming trend and permit aerations to stabilize the DO numbers? DO is the lifeline for all organisms in the Little Lake. It is the essential element for keeping the lake in balance. My last point, Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund received aeration permits. They were issued permits. They were not an experiment. You will not find the word experiment or a reference to it in any permit language. That term was introduced in 2018 when we wanted to apply for a new permit. I think that is a very important point because we never heard about that until that point in time. I'd like to thank you, and I'm all finished. I know there's plenty of other people that have a lot of other questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Short. And, I think there was a question about the DEC's dissolved oxygen data, and I think you used the word time-stamped.
Right.
Misha, are you able to respond to that question?
That would be best answered by the water quality scientists that we have. And I know the water quality scientists that we have go out and take measurements periodically as a part of their job.
Okay, so Mr. Short, that's a question that we will endeavor to answer when we respond to the comments made in this hearing formally. We'll move on to the next comment is coming from Carla Dendor, and the next person I have on the list is Mike Dendor. I'm not 100% sure if Mike Dendor is with us or not. Mike, are you with us?
Mike is actually with me.
Okay, great. So Carla, you'll be speaking, and then Mike is subsequent to you. So over to you, Carla.
Yeah, actually, this is from both of us. So as residents of Little Lake, I just wanted to address a couple of items mentioned in the application draft denial. Specifically, item 8 mentions the small northwest portion of Little Lake is experiencing shallow conditions, and the majority of public good use are not being directly impacted by the sedimentation. I'm pretty confident that any resident on Little Lake would not agree with that. We would love to swim in the lake off our dock, but due to the amount of muck and thick vegetation, it is not something that is very appealing. Trying to navigate our boat across the lake to the channel requires us to put the boat in reverse a couple of times to clear the weeds off the propeller, and then stopping the boat in front of the channel to physically remove any remaining weeds. On the items mentioned as solutions for the problem, dredging, as good as it sounds, is very cost prohibitive for a volunteer organization. In regards to the harvester, it would be wonderful to see the lake reach a level where we could enjoy the lake without hearing the harvester going up and down the lake for several hours, 5 days a week. I'm sure neighbors in the channel and Lake St. Catherine would also not miss the weeds that eventually make it to their docks. My understanding is that everyone noticed a major difference on the lake after a few years of limited aeration, which is why there is so much passion for this cause. On review of reports, I've not read where there is any damage done to the lake due to the aeration. Our hope is that we can reach a mutual agreement that will result in improvements on our struggling lake before it becomes a lake in crisis. We respectfully request a reevaluation of the application. Thank you for your time.
Oliver, you're muted.
Pardon me. Carla, thank you for your comments. I didn't hear any questions there, and I will assume, but I'll give you the chance to correct me, that you've spoken for Mike Dendor as well, and we can go on to the next speaker, who is Hernan LaFontaine. But if Mike wants to add anything, go ahead.
Nope, that's it. It's for both of us. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Hernan LaFontaine is the next speaker, to be followed by Elliot Rosen. Hernan, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Hernan LaFontaine. I'm a homeowner on Clayton Track on Lake St. Catherine, Wells, Vermont. I'm a professor emeritus at Southern Connecticut State University, former superintendent of schools in Hartford, Connecticut. My wife and I and our family first came to the Little Lake during the bicentennial celebration year in 1976. It was a beautiful, pristine body of water offering the most attractive and wholesome recreational environment for everyone who visited. 44 years have passed, and our dream of transferring our little lake cottage paradise to our younger generations as our legacy has been gravely endangered by the physical deterioration of the lake. That is why I'm here today to comment on your department's proposed decision to deny our application for permission to implement lake improvement projects. I'm going to condense many of these things because of the time limitations, but I'll skip around and try to hit some of the main points. Your report of January 29 concluded that scientific literature does not support or recommend the use of aeration, etc. And it's amazing to me because that conclusion ignores the fact that the LSCF has submitted some supporting scientific documents from several lake studies already mentioned prior by Representative Aki, and that kind of information seems to be ignored and just set aside for reviews of scientific literature. We have additional scientists who are doing work, and there's all kinds of information and quotes. Aeration is probably the most common in-lake management method and has various benefits and few, if any, drawbacks. That's from Dr. Alex Horn. This letter is to support the efforts on part of the association to propose and carry out a remediation project, and Lake St. Catherine that incorporates a multi-level approach with a focus on fine bubble diffusion. This is from Wayne Carmichael from Wright State University. This letter will also serve as my letter of support for the approach from a researcher in the field and one who is qualified to say that the project will succeed and result in publishable material that will help advance the field of lake and pond remediation efforts that stem and reverse human-induced eutrophication and its effects on water quality, including the increasing problem of freshwater harmful algae. Again, from Wayne Carmichael. Further support from Dr. Jennifer Jones that Lake St. Catherine has the needed sediment accumulations that will respond well to the approach as shown from a document report from Lake St. Catherine performed in 2009. So to me, it seems that the record clearly indicates that there are scientists that concur with the association's claims. They support the conclusions generally generated from 6 years of data collection. They agree that aeration or oxygenation of the sediment does indeed increase the rate of decomposition of these organic sediments. For DEC to claim that there is no scientific evidence in support of the aeration project contradicts the scientific documentation that was provided and ignores the professional advice of consulting scientists with decades of experience in the field. I submit to you that the conclusion arrived in proposing denial of our application is a gross error. Furthermore, it is most disconcerting to perceive a government agency essentially taking a defeatist attitude by yielding to inaction for fear that proposed programs may not work. The quintessential spirit of science is to explore through research for the discovery of innovative practices that will improve our environment. I implore upon the Vermont Department of Environment Conservation, the Watershed Division, the Lakes and Ponds programs to engage with us in a positive, cooperative, ecological experiment for the good of the lake and for the good of our generations to come, including my grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. LaFontaine, Superintendent LaFontaine, I should say, for those comments. The next speaker is Elliot Rosen, and after Elliot on our list is the name, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Eliane Rosen. So Elliot, if you're with us, over to you.
Hi, this is. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I too have been a long-term resident of the lake. We bought our house in 1988 and are now living here full-time on the Little Lake on Lockley Lane. In earlier years, when our son was young and able-bodied, we spent a lot of time water skiing on the Little Lake, and now that is an impossibility. I would like to specifically talk about the item number 7 of the draft denial in the January 19 aeration report. It's my belief this is not actually a peer review report, and a few things, strike me as erroneous. The report states that aeration is not effective at reducing organic sediments in the bottom of lakes. First, a lot of the report speaks to the use of solar bees, which are the same as in-lake aerators, which are not the same as in-lake aerators that rest on the bottom of the lake. Solar bees are surface agitators and are not expected to increase the dissolved oxygen levels at the water sediment interface. Second, regarding depth measurements taken by the DEC in Little Lake, all of the DEC depth measuring was done without benchmark readings, so it is therefore impossible to know the water level when the measurements were taken. Little Lake is recorded to have a depth fluctuation of between 1 and 1.5 feet. So any depth measuring without benchmarks will produce flawed data. Third, the depth measurements recorded by the DEC were taken with 3 different measuring methods, all of which produced inaccurate results. One method is the rake toss method, where a rake is tied to a rope and lowered into the lake in an attempt to reach the bottom. Since Little Lake is filled with vegetation, a rake does not easily reach the actual bottom and cannot provide an accurate reading. The second method used is the bathymetric mapping with bio-based sonar. According to the manufacturers of this equipment, you cannot get an accurate reading in a soft bottom shallow lake. And without benchmark readings, bio-based sonar mapping produces inaccurate results according to the manufacturer. The third method used by the DEC was by using a Secchi disc. A Secchi disc is not typically used for depth measurement of lakes. It is used for water clarity and not a measurement to the lake bottom, especially a soft bottom such as the Little Lake. Using these three inaccurate measuring methods and without any benchmark readings, the conclusion that there is no discernible increase in the overall lake depth between 2001 and 2018, I believe is false. All of the depth measurements taken by the Conservation Fund during their 6-year aeration project were done using a graduated pole device, and all measurements included benchmark readings at the dam abutment. The graduated pole device is a tool commonly used in depth measurements of reservoirs. I have been told that this measuring protocol was approved by the DEC when the initial aeration permit was granted. It seems pretty clear to me that 6 years of depth data done by the Conservation Fund showing several feet of depth increase does support the claim that aeration increases the rate of decomposition of organic sediments. I respectfully ask your department to please reevaluate this application based on all of the comments made here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Mr. Rosen. I didn't hear any questions there, so comments for the record that we will incorporate and do our best to respond to. Next on our list is, hopefully I got it right, an LEN Rosen, to be followed by Senator Collmore. LEN, if you're with us, over to you.
Oliver, I believe that was Eileen, and that's Elliot's wife. And so I think it's.
Oh.
Great. Thank you for the correction. Elliot, if your wife, is your wife Eileen with us, and would she like to comment?
No, if you can, oops.
I heard no. Were you going to add anything to that, Mr. Rosen? Okay, we can come back to, oh, go ahead. All right, we'll come back to Mr. Rosen, see if either.
No, we're done.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So next is Senator Collmore, to be followed by Robin Chestnut Tangerman.
Thank you, Oliver, and thank you to the department for the opportunity to weigh in this afternoon. So I've been closely involved with the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund and its efforts to restore Little Lake over the past several years. I have had occasion to tour Little Lake from both a boat on the water and from shore, and I know constituents who own property on the shore of the Little Lake. I've talked to town officials and people who are directly affected by its present condition and the hard work from the Conservation Fund to improve it. This isn't some body of water that has no connection for me. I represent all 27 towns in Rutland County, and I know without a doubt, because this is my backyard, that there is widespread community support for the efforts of the Conservation Fund. Over 500 signatures have been received in support of the Conservation Fund efforts for the aeration project to reduce the effects of eutrophication. These signatures have been supplied to DEC. Little Lake, as you might imagine, is the economic heart of the town of Wells. The residents know this all too well, and talk about putting their money where their mouth is. They have supported the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund's efforts with over $120,000 in ballot item initiatives voted in each year by the town residents. The town of Wells owns one of the biggest pieces of property on Little Lake. This property is home to the town park. It has a swimming area and kayak launch. And the degradation of Little Lake, the unchecked infilling, and the out-of-control weed growth has detrimentally impacted this town park. Swimming there is dangerous, and kayaking through masses of weeds, as Representative Aki mentioned, is extremely unappealing. And in my mind, this is simply unacceptable. According to the local real estate agents I've talked with, homeowners trying to sell properties now on Little Lake have had to dramatically reduce their prices, and the properties are taking longer to sell, or in fact, they're just not selling at all. Obviously, this reduction in property values will have a direct connection to the town's grand list. That will affect every single resident in town, and property taxes will increase proportionately as the ground list gets reduced. So I'd urge the Department of Environmental Conservation to weigh this when making their decision. And in summary, there is overwhelming and widespread community support for this whole lake aeration project. The LCCF has been spending their own money to fund the restoration projects that they've been implementing for the past 10 years on Little Lake. This full lake aeration project, as proposed, will also provide valuable scientific data that will be beneficial to all Vermont lakes and fill a void where state data does not currently exist. So I'd like to strongly request that the DEC reevaluate this application in light of these comments and others that are being made here today. And again, I deeply appreciate the opportunity to testify. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Colmar. We will move on to the next speaker, which is Robin Chestnut-Tangerman, to be followed by Don Prius, if I pronounced that correctly. So Robin, over to you.
Robin, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Brian. I'm out of practice. Thank you, Oliver, for this opportunity. Much of the DEC's denial of this application seems to rest on the issue of water quality. Water quality has never been the issue. The issues have been depth, the decreasing depth, milfoil, and accustomed use under the public trust doctrine. I have been out on the lake many times with many of you and participated in depth measurements. Misha has stated that there was no increase in water depth due to aeration. And Mr. Rosen laid out a number of reasons why that contention is, or why that may be a false assertion or an inaccurate assertion. I've been out on the lake many times. I've witnessed and participated in depth measurements. I've seen the depth maps included in the 2009 DEC aeration report, and I've seen the reality on the lake. And on many different occasions, I've personally taken depth measurements where the DEC map shows 4 feet of water, and I have measured 7 or 8 feet in those same spots. Those spots are all inside the aeration zones where diffusers have operated for several years. That's just the reality on the water. I've boated across the lake and have measured as little as 2 feet of water in the exact spot where we have photographs of people diving off a dock. So not only do we have a difference in approach of treatment issues in Little Lake, but we don't even agree on the verifiable facts like depth. And while measurements taken by untrained laymen may be suspect in the scientific realm, they've been taken consistently by the same people using the same tools and same techniques, providing long-term consistency across many, many years of observations. Chemical herbicides may be an important part of treatment for Eurasian milfoil, but they are not all of the treatment. Same with harvesting. Harvesting, we all know, has the issue of distributing bits of milfoil to replant. Herbicides deposit that dead plant material on the bottom of the lake, further exacerbating the depth issues. And so which leads us to the issue of aeration to decrease the, to digest the muck at the bottom of the lake. The final point I want to address in this limited time is the department's perspective that introducing additional oxygen into the biosphere to increase the decomposition rate of the bottom muck is dangerous and excessive and would, quote, unnecessarily impact the natural state of the fish and wildlife habitat of Little Lake, end quote. Yet the department also determines that dredging, physically sucking that very same habitat out of the lake entirely, is an acceptable and appropriate treatment. I believe that the department's caution regarding aeration is rooted in the scarcity of peer-reviewed studies on aeration rather than in proven harmful effects of the process. I urge the department to reconsider this denial and to instead embrace the opportunity to increase knowledge of this technique by approving the permit request and continuing to closely monitor the process for negative impacts, to which date we have not seen any in Little Lake. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Just moving on down our list. Next, we have Don Prius. Apologies if I mispronounced that, followed by Robin Barley. Don, over to you.
Hello, good afternoon. Yes, I'm chair of the select board. I've held that position for about 8 or 9 years now. I've been around wells and actually was a camp owner for, well, I wasn't, but my parents were a camp owner starting in 1960, which I held on up to into the 90s. And then the pressures of 3 kids going to college, something had to go and the camp went. Sorry day, but it happened. I've kind of followed this whole Lake Association or Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund, well, the association as well. I've had a vested interest in it all my life. I basically grew up there one way or the other with my grandparents or whatever since 1949. So I can tell you a lot of stories that are all true about the lake. They may not be scientific, but they are factual. I can tell you about gravel beaches. I can tell you about floats with diving boards, water skiing by the hour, and all the things that cannot be done right now. I have noticed that the aeration projects were definitely kind of a step in the right direction. The weeds are one issue. Herbicides are one thing. Muck, silt, and so forth are another. As a town, we have tried to do a couple of projects to improve our runoff from roads and so forth. We have another grant coming up, which the project will be undertaken this spring in our park area, which happens to be at the northwest corner of the lake. I believe that was referred to in your previous conversations, which will again help to mitigate silt or runoff. But a lot of people have talked about what the aeration did and how much it improved it. It does not seem to be an invasive act. It has no environmental, as you people have said, no environmental issues. And I feel that, stopping that is probably a grave error for something that, like I say, has no real, we're not dumping poison in the water, whether it's safe poison or not safe poison, it's poison. So I think that you really need to sit down, take a look in the mirror, and I can tell you the dollar values, not right this second, but of the appraised values of homes around the lake, in the Wells portion of the lake, which includes part of the big lake, and it's several, and I mean several $1 million. The tax values are a lot of money, and we're a small town in a small state with very limited industrial growth and high-paying jobs. and we need every nickel we can get from wherever we can get it from. I believe the coronavirus has proved that to us. And I really think, it's time to look ahead rather than look behind. And that's pretty much my spiel for the day.
Thank you, Don. Noted. And we have only 2 people left on the list who have signed up for comment. That next being Robin Barley, to be followed by Diane Schoback. So Robin, over to you.
Hi, good evening, and thank you for giving me some time to talk about a few things cited in the draft denial, that Little Lake does not have any water quality impairments and meets the Vermont water quality standards. This is untrue. The DEC is only looking at a few water quality parameters such as phosphorus and nitrogen levels when making the statement. Under the Vermont State Water Quality Standard, Little Lake should meet the following criteria as written in the standard. Section 29A-105 of Vermont Water Quality Standards is called the Anti-Degradation Policy. I'd like to read just a couple of excerpts that apparently the DEC was not paying attention to when examining this application. A, general. All waters shall be managed in accordance with these rules to protect, maintain, and improve water quality. The DEC is charged with upholding this anti-degradation, that's a hard word to be sharing with all of you, policy by management. The very nature of these water quality standards requires ongoing management and assessment. And in the opinion of those who study eutrophication, in-lake restoration treatments. More excerpts. Waters shall be managed to achieve and maintain a level of water quality compatible with excellent quality swimming, boating, and fishing. The use of waters for swimming and other primary contact recreation. 4A, waters shall be managed to achieve and maintain a level of water quality compatible with good quality boating. 5, waters shall be managed to achieve and maintain very good quality fishing. 6, waters shall be managed to achieve and maintain a level of water quality compatible with the enjoyment of aesthetic conditions. There are many more standards listed in this statute. I've only mentioned a few. Little Lake does not meet those basic water quality standards. For those of us who have lived on Little Lake for decades, we have witnessed the deterioration, even though the DEC is charged with upholding this anti-degradation policy. The levels of muck in the entire lake prohibits boating, impedes fishing, limits kayaking, is a danger to swimmers, and ruins the aesthetic conditions of the lake. The public does not have full support of uses as decreed in the Vermont Water Quality Standards. As for those aesthetics of the small areas of bubbles on the surface of the lake from the aerators, no unfavorable public comment was ever received regarding the bubbles and upwelling created by the aeration system during the 6 years of operation. Contrast that with the daily unfavorable comments received from lake visitors and residents throughout the spring, summer, and fall seasons as concerning the excessive muck and excessive plant infestation prohibiting the enjoyment of the lake. A 2019 Rutland Herald article documented many of these complaints. The public trust doctrine that your department operates under requires management of the waters of the state to avoid lake in crisis. However, this draft denial, there is reference made to waiting for the lake to be in crisis before intervention with in-lake treatments. Can you imagine if a person looked at their health care in that same way, waiting for their body to be in crisis before they took the measures to have a healthy diet and lifestyle? Based on these facts I have just presented, I strongly encourage your department to re-examine the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund application. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Robin. And so we're moving to the last person who signed up prior to the meeting to comment, and that's Diane Schoback. And Diane, if you're with us on the computer, please unmute yourself. And if you're on the phone, you can use *6 to do the same. Okay. David, are you aware that if that Diane has joined us at any point?
You know, Oliver, I don't know. I didn't recognize. Let me see if I can see all the phone numbers. Yeah, I've got to believe that she can hear you and could do a *6. So I'm guessing she's not on the line.
Okay. No problem. If you do get in touch with Diane after today's meeting, you can let her know that she's able to submit written comment for another 5 or 6 days. Misha said, I believe it's until next week sometime. We're accepting public comments on this draft denial. It's 5:20. Let me open up the floor. I don't believe I've scrolled through the chat box. I don't believe anyone signed up to add a comment using the chat function. So I'll just take a verbal roll call right now to see if anyone who hasn't commented yet would like to speak. So we'll start with that, and then we'll go on to another opportunity to speak. But let's start with first, anyone in the meeting who hasn't spoken yet would like to add anything? Okay. Then I'll afford the opportunity, because we've all committed to be here till 5:30 or so. For anyone who's with us who already spoke, would like to add anything, to get a second opportunity to speak.
I would like to take that opportunity, Oliver. If no one else, I'd like to give everyone else the opportunity first. And if no one else speaks, I'd like to take that opportunity.
Okay. Yeah, and Zapata just reminded me that people are so inclined, you can use the raise hand function, which is a little hand on top of the bar in Microsoft Teams at the top of your screen. But I don't see any raised hands. I haven't heard any other voices of people expressing interest to comment the second time. So I'll give another 5 seconds for anyone else so we can get a list here. Would anybody else like to add a comment? David, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Excellent, thank you. I'd like to make a point about item 9 that's listed in the draft denial. In item 9, you reference possible negative effects on the wetlands at the north end of Little Lake. Yet there are no documented cases of this happening with any aeration project, and you cite no evidence. Sally referenced this earlier. Dr. Jennifer Jones testified earlier this year at a meeting that she's had aeration projects in over 150 of her Michigan lakes, and again, with no negative impacts on wetlands or sensitive vegetation. In the aeration permits that Little Lake has been functioning under the past 3 permits, there was also no negative impacts to sensitive vegetation. Even Google searches, I can't turn up any negative impacts from aeration projects to sensitive vegetation or wetlands. So it's very concerning that item 9 is there with no documented references. Furthermore, the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund provided supporting documentation from Alex Horn, Professor Wayne Carmichael, and Jennifer Jones, all stating from their experience that there are no negative impacts from whole lake aeration systems. And additionally, Dr. Jones stated that all of her research is peer-reviewed by the Michigan Department of Environmental Conservation. So clearly, any concerns that Vermont DEC might have about the negative impact to the wetlands or sensitive vegetation are just misstated. Furthermore, the case studies that were cited to support the Lake Carmi aeration project, those studies were cited to support DEC's view that there would be no negative consequences from the aeration project in Carmi. If the DEC found case studies to support its belief that aeration is not going to produce a negative impact in Lake Carmi, then those same case studies must also be applicable to other aeration projects in other lakes in the state of Vermont. Period.
Great. Thank you, David. That's added to the formal record from this meeting. And it's about 5:24. We had hoped to wrap up the public comment period at 5:25, and we're doing very well for time. So I think we will call it there. I'm not hearing any other of the participants in this meeting hoping to add any comments. So we will thank you. We're going to move on to next steps, but let me just wrap up this section of the meeting by thanking everyone for taking time to prepare articulate and well thought out remarks, for staying within the time limits, and for being professional and diplomatic in your remarks. It's a very welcome opportunity here to hear from you all. So once again, thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Misha to give folks an idea what the next steps are with the review of the formal process for reviewing this permit application. Misha.
Yeah, thanks, Oliver. And I'd echo your sentiments. I do appreciate everyone's time, their input, their comments, and just being respectful of how the meeting played out. I know it's challenging with the virtual format, and it might seem a little rule heavy on the front side of things, but we've done a couple public meetings so far, and the extra rules really help make things go a bit easier. So for next steps, I'll just quickly share my screen here. Overall, the comments that were made tonight will be addressed in a formal response summary document. Some folks have already commented through the environmental notice bulletin. The webpage to this particular application, it can be found here. If you go to that webpage, you can submit a comment through that means, or you can send me an email. Here's my email address. The public comment period ends on January 13th. So like I said, all comments that are received during the public comment period will be responded to in a formal response summary document. And those comments are reviewed against how the findings that are made in the document and any additional research that may need to be done to produce that response summary document. Typically, when comments are made on a project, I can't give you a specific date as to when the final decision will be issued, because I do take comments seriously and review them amongst the program and department. So, and then finally, once that final decision has been made, everything is posted to that environmental notice bulletin page. And that is the end of that process.
Misha, David had one more quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Misha, the reason for this meeting is the draft denial, and I'd like to focus on that one word there, the word draft. And today there were a lot of comments made asking your department to reevaluate this application. And I'd like to know if we can get a response from you and your department as to whether or not you will reevaluate this application, leaving this denial in the state of a draft. And I guess that's the end of my question.
So your question is, so in reviewing comments, I review the comment that's made, and then I compare how that comment interacts with the technical details of the application, and then how the technical details of that application interact with the technical findings in that draft denial. And then so making that assessment, I go back and reassess whether or not those findings can be made, whether they should be altered. So it's not a short, quick, and easy process, unfortunately.
So is it safe to say that that what you're describing is some level of reevaluation?
That's the purpose of the public comment period. Okay. If public comments come in and they are technical in nature, then yes, those comments are assessed, and then are responded to.
Thank you.
Great. So not seeing any other questions or comments, and then having reached the end of our.
Looks like we've got a hand up.
Oh, let me look at the list of participants here. I see Representative Aki has her hand up. Representative Aki, did you have a question?
Yes, could you explain the appeal process and what the timing would be if you review the public comments and then you release a final decision? Isn't there an appeal time in there as well?
Yeah, so in the draft denial, the one condition that's there is the condition that outlines how an appeal is made. And I believe it's a 30-day time frame after the final decision is posted.
And it is 30 days, and an appeal is made to the environmental court in the Vermont judiciary.
So Misha and Laura, does the permit contain information or refer to more detailed information about the appeals process?
Yeah, so the draft denial has the condition specifically related to an appeal.
Okay.
And that's in the completely within the legal realm. So as to filing an appeal, how that's filed, the paperwork required to file, that's out of my area of expertise.
But Representative Aki, there is a defined process for it, and the applicant can choose to appeal after the decision is finalized, and as long as it's done within 30 days following the process that's spelled out in the draft denial or the final denial, if we do get to that point.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And I had seen the 30-day limit in their appeal within 30 days, and I wondered exactly what that time frame was. But that's 30 days after the final result is filed.
Correct.
Thank you.
I see Zapata Courage from Vermont DC Wetlands Program has her hand raised. Zapata?
Yeah, Oliver, I don't know what the appeal process is for the Lakes and Ponds program, so I'm asking this question for clarity's sake. In the wetlands program, only the people who have actually submitted a comment can do the appeal, and their appeal can only be made upon the comments that they have made. So for example, if the woman that was supposed to be on the call tonight doesn't make a comment, she would be uneligible to appeal the denial of the permit. And if Sally wanted to appeal but didn't bring up the question of dissolved, she would be able to appeal the permit from that place. That's my understanding, at least through the wetland program. And I just wanted to ensure that people understood how that appeal process actually looks, because it can be cumbersome and confusing.
Yeah, thanks for adding that, Zapata. We have a similar language in the appeal condition that we have. And I do know there's also like a little bit of wiggle room in that language that says, yes, it has to be related. You have to comment and your appeal has to be related to that comment. However, if a judge determines that you have probable cause to appeal, I think that the environmental court can potentially change how and who can appeal. But overall, generally, it follows the outline in that condition.
Great. I see that Carla Dendor has her hand raised. Carla, go ahead.
Yes, to that end, so if some other people decided to write in by January 13th, would they also be allowed to be part of the appeal?
Yes, in that, again, going back to kind of how Zapata framed it, to appeal, the comment needs to be made related to a specific, your comment and your appeal have to be related. And again, it's the language is in that draft denial as to the kind of the parameters as to how one may appeal.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Okay. So I think we have we've covered that point, and I encourage folks to review the language in the draft denial and the appeals process if you are so interested. And if you have additional questions on that, you can contact Misha or myself, and we'll do our best to answer those questions as soon as we get them from you. So with that, I want to thank the representatives of the Lake St. Catherine Conservation Fund, representatives of the Town of Wells, the Wells Select Board, Little Lake property owners, state legislature, and anyone else who is a concerned, Vermonter with information and ideas and opinions to share about the future of Little Lake St. Catherine. So with that, I think we can close this virtual public meeting, call it to an end. And as Misha said, we will be going through every public comment received formally or verbally, drafting a response, reviewing those in light of the findings of the draft permit denial, and eventually issuing both a response and a final permit decision. So we will be in touch as needed. Feel free to reach out. And once again, thanks for participating in this meeting, and have a good evening, everyone. I think there's some interesting events transpiring to our south down in Washington, D.C. So let's hope that the cooler heads prevail in all forums of citizen discourse in our country this evening. Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.